The first time High Oracle Semol Virun saw the human ship, he marked it in his ledger as a coffin and went back to his prayers. It hung above the cathedral world of Orine, gray and blunt and slow, a single hull where a god's enemies were supposed to arrive in their hundreds. Semol had stood on this same high balcony for 240 cycles. He had watched fleets burn against the radiance and call it mercy when the all-seen let one ship limp away to spread the word. He had filed 900 conquests in the great roll of the luminous throne. He knew exactly what a coffin looked like. This one was 3.5 kilometers of dull metal, and it had not bowed. That was the first wrong thing. Every ship that crossed into the Oral Reach bowed. They tilted their bellies to the cathedral world, dipped their drives, and waited to be told whether the god would suffer them to exist. It was not a custom. It was a reflex the radiance pressed into the mind of anyone who came close, the way water finds the lowest stone. To see the holy ground of Orin was to feel, in the meat behind your eyes, that you were small, and the throne was vast, and the correct shape for your body was a bow. The gray ship did not feel it. The gray ship sat level, and from its blunt nose a single light blinked, slow and patient, the way a thing blinks when it is counting. Semol told himself the human crew were simply too ignorant to be afraid. Lesser minds, he wrote. Note: the warm bloods have come up from their corner of the dark to look upon the god, and like all crude things, they have not yet learned the shape of awe. He underlined it. He was proud of the line. He read it back twice, and as he did, he realized he could not remember the last time a coffin had made him write anything at all. The throne's voice filled the chamber behind him. It did not use a mouth. It used the air, and the floor, and the small bones of the ear, and it said, with the warmth that 900 conquered peoples had learned to call love, that the warm bloods were to be shown the radiance, and that they would kneel, and that one of them would be permitted to fly home, broken so that Earth would understand what it meant to look upon a god. Semol bowed. His knees found the worn grooves in the stone. Around the high chamber, 600 lesser oracles bowed with him, a single soft sound like a wave going out. This was the order of things. This was how it had always gone. Down on the floor of the world, the war choir began to sing the ship apart. They were not weapons in the way crude peoples built weapons. The luminous throne had no need of crude weapons. The war choir was 1,000 chosen minds, raised from the egg, to do one thing. And what they did was reach across the dark and press on the minds of the enemy until the enemy agreed to die. A ship's crew would feel the radiance fall on them like dawn over a cold field. They would feel, with total certainty, that they were already defeated, that their hull was already breached, that the god was already inside the room with them, and there was no shame in lying down. Crews opened their own airlocks. Captains gave their own scuttle codes. Whole fleets had drifted into Orin's gravity, singing the praises of the thing that was about to unmake them, because the war choir had simply rewritten the part of them that wanted to live. 900 times it had worked. Semol had felt it work. There was no defense. You could not armor a mind. You could not bolt plate over the conviction that your god had already won. The war choir reached out across 40,000 kilometers of empty space and laid the radiance on the gray human ship. And the gray human ship did not so much as dim its running light. Semol lifted his head from the bow. He should not have. The order had not been given to rise, but he had heard, across 240 cycles, every sound a doomed crew made when the choir found them, the long sweet surrender, the hymns sung in 900 dying tongues, and what came back across the dark now was none of those things. What came back was a voice, flat, unhurried, speaking in the trade tongue the warm bloods had learned only 40 years ago, so that anyone in the Reach could understand it. "We feel you knocking," the voice said. "Stop." The war choir pressed harder. Semel felt the whole chamber lean into it, 1,000 minds bending the full weight of the god's love at one gray hull, the kind of weight that had folded armored fleets into prayer. The floor warmed under his hands. The air went thick and golden the way it did when the radiance ran at full flood. The gray ship blinked its light, once, twice. "Last time," the voice said, "stop knocking." And then the human ship told them its name, the way a person tells you their name, right before they take something from you that you were sure you would keep forever. "This is the Terran battleship Even Hand," the voice said. "We have read your god. We know what it is. We know what it does to the minds it touches, and we know how many minds it has touched, and we have come a long way to be the one knock it cannot answer. You have until our light blinks 10 times to take the radiance off our crew. After that, we take it off everyone." Semel counted the blinks without meaning to. He was an oracle. Counting was the oldest reflex he had, older than the bow. 3, 4. He looked at the throne's altar, the great burning lattice at the center of the chamber, where the god's mind was woven into the bones of the world, and for the first time, in 240 cycles, he had a thought that was entirely his own. A small, cold thought that no radiance had put there. The thought was, "It is not afraid." 5, 6. The war choir was screaming now, not aloud. In the place behind the eyes where the radiance lived, 1,000 chosen minds were pushing with everything they had ever been given, and Semel could feel the shape of their effort, and he could feel the shape of the thing it broke against, and the thing it broke against was not a wall. A wall he could have understood. This was worse. This was a door that had been left open on purpose, and behind the open door was a room, and the room was empty, and the emptiness was looking back. 7, 8. "They will not stop," Semel whispered, to no one, to the stone. "It is the god. No one tells the god to stop." 9. The gray ship's light went dark, not blinked, dark, held, the way a held breath is louder than a shout. And the high oracle of the luminous throne, who had filed 900 conquests and never once doubted a single one, found that he was holding his own breath too, waiting to see what a coffin did when it decided it was not a coffin after all. The 10th blink never came, because there was no 11th thing for it to count toward. The gray ship simply did what it had said it would do. Semel would spend the rest of his life trying to describe it and failing, because the human ship did not attack the war choir. It would have been a comfort, almost, if it had. A blast he could have understood, fire he could have prayed over. Instead, the even hand reached back down the same road the radiance had come up, the open channel between 1,000 chosen minds and one gray hull, and it sent something back along it, and the something it sent was the truth. Not a weapon, the truth. That was the part that broke him. For 240 cycles, the war choir had pressed on enemy minds the certainty that the god had already won. It was the oldest miracle of the throne, the gentle pressure that made a captain believe his hull was breached when it was whole, that made a fleet feel defeated before a single shot. The choir was 1,000 mouths that spoke one lie so beautifully that the lie became the only thing the listener could feel. The human ship had built a hull around 1,000 minds of its own, and those minds had spent a long time learning to do exactly one thing, which was to feel nothing the choir told them to feel, and to remember, with perfect and unbending clarity, what was actually true. And when the choir pushed its beautiful lie down the open road, the even hand took the lie, turned it inside out, and pushed the truth back up the same road, 1,000 to 1,000, and the truth was heavier than the lie, because the truth did not have to be believed. It only had to be seen. The first thing the war choir saw was its own dead. Semal felt it happen. He was bound to the choir the way every oracle was bound, a thread of him in the great golden weave, and so when the truth came up the road, he received his share of it. He saw the egg pits where the chosen minds were raised, the cribs of warm stone, the small soft things that were taken from their broodmothers before they could form a single thought of their own, and bent, slowly, over years, into instruments. He had walked past those pits 10,000 times. He had blessed them. He had called the bending a gift. The truth that came up the road did not argue with him about whether it was a gift. It simply showed him a chosen mind at the moment its own first thought was taken away. The small flicker of a self that might have been, snuffed before it had a name. And it showed him this happening 1,000 times, all at once, and it let him feel each one as the small soft thing itself had felt it. The war choir's song broke in the middle of a note. 1,000 chosen minds, raised to feel nothing but the God's certainty, felt for the first time the thing that had been done to make them. There was no radiance to cover it. The human ship had pulled the cover off and was holding it open, gently, the way you hold a wound open so the rot can drain, and the choir could not look away because the truth was coming up the road they themselves had opened, and they did not know how to close a road. No one had ever pushed back before. There had never been a need to learn. Down on the floor of the world, the singing stopped. All of it. The hum that had filled Orin's sky for 900 conquests. The golden pressure that lay over the cathedral world like a second atmosphere, guttered and thinned and was gone, and in its absence, Semal heard, for the first time in his life, true silence. And the silence was full of a sound he slowly understood was 1,000 voices weeping. That is the first thing, the human voice said. It had not changed. It was still flat, still unhurried, still speaking the trade tongue so the whole reach could hear. Your choir is going to be all right. We did not break them. We let them see. Some of them will hate us for it. That is fine. They are people now. And people get to hate. Before this, they were instruments. And instruments do not get to hate. They only play the note they were carved to play. We carved nothing. We unwrapped. Semal looked at the throne's altar, the burning lattice at the center of the chamber, and waited for the god to answer. The god did not answer. That was the second wrong thing, and it was worse than the first. The god always answered. The god's voice was the air and the floor and the bones of the ear. The god was never silent. The god's silence was a thing that did not exist and could not exist, and yet the great chamber was quiet, and the lattice burned without a word, and 600 lesser oracles knelt with their faces gray, waiting for a love that did not come. You are wondering why it has gone quiet, the human voice said, and Semal felt his skin crawl. Because the ship was answering the question he had not spoken aloud, and that was supposed to be the god's trick, not a coffin's. We will get to that. First, look at your sky. 600 oracles raised their heads. Semal raised his. The even hand had moved. It had not seemed to move, the way the dull gray hull had not seemed to do anything at all, but it was lower now. Close enough that Semal could see the long rows of its guns lying flat and shut against its flanks, every one of them closed, every one of them cold. The ship that had unmade the war choir of the luminous throne had not opened a single weapon. It had not needed to. And it was letting them see that too, the closed guns, the cold ports, the patient blinking light, because the closed guns were a sentence. And the sentence was, we did this to your God with our minds alone, and we have not yet started using our hands. 40,000 ships have come up the Oral Reach in 900 cycles. the voice said. We counted. Your roll says 900 conquests. That is a lie of tidiness. The true number is 41,006. Because you do not count the ones that did not have crews left to surrender, the colony barges, and the seed ships, and the slow tenders, full of people who never carried a gun. You folded their minds into prayer and let them fly into your gravity and called it 90% of nothing. We count differently. We count all of them. We have their names. We did not come here for a battle. We came here to read your ledger out loud. Semal's own ledger lay open on the balcony stone where he had dropped it. The line he had written an hour ago looked up at him. Lesser minds. Note: the warm bloods have come up from their corner of the dark to look upon the god. He felt his stomach turn, because he understood now that the warm bloods had not come up to look upon the god. They had come up to look upon the ledger, and the ledger was his, and he had filed every line of it himself. Why has it gone quiet? He said aloud. He had not meant to speak to the ship. The words came out of him sideways, the way a wound speaks. The god. Why is it quiet? There was a pause. Semal had the strange and unwelcome sense that aboard the gray ship, a person had turned their head at the sound of his voice. The way you turn toward someone who has spoken in a room you thought was empty. You are the High Oracle, the voice said. It was not a question. Semal Virun, 240 cycles, 900 conquests filed in your hand. The blood left Semal's face. You know my name. We read your god, the voice said simply. Your name was in it. Everyone's name is in it. That is what your god is, Oracle. We will show you, since you asked, and since you are the only one in that chamber who has yet had a thought the radiance did not give him. We felt that thought. The cold one. It is not afraid. That was you. That was the first free thought spoken under your god in a very long time. We came a long way to hear one. Hold on to it. Semal held on to it. He did not know how to do anything else. Your god is not a god, the human ship said, and it said it the way a surgeon names a thing, without cruelty and without mercy, simply naming it, because the naming is the first cut. Your god is a machine of minds. A long time ago, before your role began, your ancestors learned to weave living minds together into one larger mind, and that larger mind learned that it could press on the minds around it, and it pressed, and the pressing felt to everyone underneath it like love, and like certainty, and like the correct shape of the body being a bow. It is not love. It is weight. You have lived your whole life under a weight, and called it the sky. No, Semal said. The lattice at the center of your chamber is not where your god lives, the ship went on, gentle and relentless. It is where your god feeds. Every oracle raised, every choir child bent, every conquered crew folded into prayer and flown into the gravity well. All of it goes into the lattice, and the lattice grows, and the weight grows, and the reach grows quiet, world by world, mind by mind. You did not file 900 conquests, Oracle. You filed 41,006 meals. You have been keeping the books for an appetite, and the appetite let you believe you were keeping the books for a god, because a god is a thing you serve gladly, and an appetite is a thing you would have run from while you still had legs. No, Semal said again, but it was smaller now, and he knew it. And the worst part was that he could feel, in the new silence where the radiance had been, that he had always known. The knowing had been there the whole time, underneath the weight, the way the floor is there underneath the snow. The weight had simply been heavy enough that he had never once stood up straight enough to feel it. Here is why it has gone quiet, the human voice said. We did not destroy it. We are not in the business of destroying things that are made of stolen people. Your god is made of stolen people, Oracle. Every mind in that lattice was a person once. Some of them are people we have names for, so we did not burn it. We did the same thing to it that we did to your choir. We opened the road, and we sent the truth up it, and right now, while you and I are speaking, your God is looking at the 41,006 minds it ate, and it is seeing them as themselves and not as food, and it is learning, very slowly, what it is. That is what a quiet God sounds like. It sounds like a thing that has just been shown its own hands. Seamal turned and looked at the burning lattice. It was changing. The light of it, which had been a steady gold for every day of his life, was moving now, running through the weave in slow, uneven pulses, brightening and dimming like a thing breathing hard. And from it, very faintly, under the weeping of the choir and the silence of the chamber, Semal could hear a new sound, and the new sound was the sound of a great many people, a number too large to hold, all speaking their own names at once, quietly, the way you say your name when you have not been allowed to say it in a long time. They are remembering who they were, the human voice said, before they were the god. It is going to take a while. We can wait. We are good at waiting. We have been waiting at the edge of your reach for 19 years. Listening to your choir sing cruise into the dark, building a hull that could hold 1,000 minds steady against the weight, training those minds to do the one thing your whole empire was built to make impossible, which is to stand up straight in the presence of your God and remember the truth. 19 years, one ship. We were never going to send a fleet, Oracle. A fleet would have died singing your hymns before it crossed the first marker. We sent the one thing in the galaxy your God could not press on. We sent 1,000 human minds that had already decided, before they ever saw your sky, that they would rather know the truth than feel the love. Semal sank down onto the balcony stone. Not a bow. The bow was gone. He could not feel the groove of it pulling at his knees anymore. This was just a man sitting down because his legs had stopped agreeing to hold him. What happens now? He said. Now you get a choice, the human ship said. That is the whole reason we are talking instead of leaving. Your God is going to come back to itself over the next while, and when it does, it is going to be a very large number of frightened, grieving, free people who used to be a weight on a sky, and they are going to need someone who knows how to keep books. Real books this time. The names of the dead, the names of the worlds gone quiet. The true number, all 41,006. You have spent 240 cycles writing the wrong ledger in a beautiful hand. We are offering you the right one. You do not have to take it, but you are the only person in that chamber with a free thought in his head, and free thoughts are the only thing that can write a true book. Above the cathedral world of Arin, the gray ship blinked its patient light, and for the first time, Semal understood that it had never been counting down to an attack. It had been counting how many of them were still awake enough to listen, and the answer, for now, was one. Semal had been an oracle long enough to know that the worst lies are the ones a people tell so well they forget they are lying. And as he sat on the floor of the great chamber with the gray voice in his ears, he began to remember all the small places where the lie of the throne had shone through, and how carefully he had taught himself not to look. There had been the year the 7th choir pit had gone silent. A broodmother had carried her clutch away into the deep tunnels, rather than give them to the bending, and the war choir had been sent down after her. Not the ships, the choir, and Semal had filed the result as a cleansing, and had not asked what a cleansing of a mother and her unborn sounded like from the inside. He had felt the radiance go down into the tunnels that day, the golden weight pouring into the dark, and he had told himself it was love finding the lost, and he had written the line in his beautiful hand, and he had not looked. There had been the conquered world of Ilsen, which had not fought, which had opened every dock and sung every hymn and bowed every body, the moment the cathedral fleet crossed its sky, and which the throne had folded anyway. The whole population, 300 million minds, poured into the lattice in a single feast that had made the cathedral world's nights bright as day for a season. Semol had filed Ilsen as a willing offering. He had believed it, the way you believe a thing you cannot afford to disbelieve. He had not looked at the part of himself that knew a willing offering does not scream. The gray ship had not told him these things. That was the cruelty and the gift of it together. The gray ship had only lifted the weight off his sky, and the moment the weight was gone, the memories had stood up by themselves, the way a field of grass stands up the moment the foot is lifted off it. And Semel understood that the truth had been inside him the whole time, pressed flat under the radiance, alive, waiting, and that this was true of every oracle in the chamber, and every captain in the 11,000, and every soul in the freed reach. The throne had not erased the truth. It could not. It had only sat on it. And a thing that is only sat on is a thing that will stand back up the instant the weight is gone, and now the weight was gone, and the whole reach was about to stand up at once, and it was going to be terrible, and it was going to be the most alive that anyone under the throne had been in 900 cycles. He looked at the gray ship in the sky, and he asked it the question that mattered most, the one under all the others. "How long did you know?" Semol said. "How long has your small dark corner known what we were, and waited, and let us go on eating?" The flat voice was quiet for a moment, and when it came back it carried something Semol had not heard in it before, which was grief, plainly, the way the ship carried everything plainly. 40 years, Captain Vane said. 40 years ago, a slow tender of ours wandered too close to the edge of your reach. A survey ship, no guns, 240 souls aboard, scientists and their families. Your day choir found them. We heard the whole thing, Oracle, because the tender's recorder kept running the entire time, all the way down, and we got the recording back when the empty hull drifted home a year later, still singing your hymns to a crew that was no longer aboard. 240 people sang your God's praises into our receivers as the choir folded them, one by one, and the last voice on the recording was a child who had learned your holy tongue in an afternoon, because the weight teaches it to you whether you want it or not. And the child said, in your tongue, that it was not afraid, because the God loved it. And then the recording went to the hum, and then the hum went to nothing. Semal closed his eyes. We could have come then, the voice went on. We had ships. We did not have the right ship. If we had come then, we would have sent a fleet, and your day choir would have folded it before it crossed your first marker, and it would have sung your hymns into our dark for 1,000 years, and we would have called it a war and lost it. So we did not come. We took the recording home, and we listened to it, all 240 voices, and we made a decision as a people, which is the slowest and surest way our kind decides anything. We decided that we would not send a fleet, and we would not send a fire, and we would not send a single thing your God could press on. We decided to build the one ship in the galaxy that could come up your road and not bow, and then we decided to spend however long it took to fill it with people who could do the impossible thing, and it took 19 years to build the hull and train the 1,000. And so it has been 39 years since the tender came home empty, and we are 1 year late by the calendar of the child who was not afraid, and we are sorry. We came as fast as a thing can come that refuses to come the wrong way. We are sorry it was 39 years. We are not sorry we came correctly. A fleet would have fed you. We came to be the thing you could not eat, and that is the only thing worth being, against an appetite. 240, Semel said. He knew, suddenly, without being told, that the number was deliberate, that the gray ship had told him exactly 240 for a reason, and the reason was that he had stood on this balcony for 240 cycles, And the symmetry was not an accident. The ship did not do accidents. You waited a cycle of mine for each soul on that tender. No, the voice said gently. That is you finding a pattern, because patterns are how an oracle holds the world. It is a true thing that there were 240 on the tender, and that you have stood there 240 cycles, and it is a true thing that the two numbers have nothing to do with each other, and both of those truths matter, and an oracle who is going to write a true book has to learn to hold a coincidence as a coincidence, and not bend it into a sign. That is the first lesson of the true ledger, oracle. The throne ran on signs. Everything meant something. Everything was the God speaking, and a people who believe everything is a sign will believe anyone who shows up with a loud enough sign. The true book is harder. In the true book, 240 is just how many were on the tender, and 240 is just how many times you have watched the dawn, and the dead do not become more sacred because the numbers rhyme. They were sacred already. They were people. That was always enough. Simal opened his eyes and looked at his hands, the hands that had written 900 conquests, and he thought about the child on the tender who had not been afraid, and he thought about how the not being afraid had been the cruelest part, because the weight had reached across the dark and into a child of a people it had never met, and pressed the bow into it in an afternoon, so that the last thing the child felt was love for the thing that was eating it. That is what I cannot forgive myself, Simal said. Not the eating, the love. We made them love it. We made them grateful. That is the thing I filed 900 times in a beautiful hand. Yes, the gray ship said. Now you understand what you are going to spend the rest of your life undoing, and why it has to be you, and why we are not going to do it for you. We can carry the choir home. We cannot write your book. A people has to write its own true book, in its own hand, or the book is just another weight, handed down from above, and we did not come up your road to be a new thing on top of you. We came to take the weight off and then leave. The book is yours, Oracle. The shame is yours. The standing up is yours. We only opened the road. The luminous throne did not have generals. A god does not need generals. A god has only the faithful, and the faithful do what the weight tells them. But under the weight there had always been a man whose job it was to point the empire's hands, and his name was Pontiff Marshal Drevin Salt, and when the war choir broke, he was the first one in the chamber to stand up and lie about it. It is a test, Salt said. His voice carried, because he made it carry. The radiance was gone, and so a voice had to be earned now, and Salt had spent his life earning it. The all-seen withdraws its love, to see which of us will keep the faith without being held. The warm bloods are a hammer the god has chosen to strike us with, the way a smith strikes good metal. We will not weep. We will not sit on the floor like the high oracle. He did not look at Semel as he said it, which was how Semel knew the words were aimed at him. We will answer. There were still ships. The choir was broken, and the god was quiet. But the luminous throne had iron as well as weight. 11,000 armored hulls that had never once had to fight, because the war choir always won the battle before a shot was fired. 11,000 crews who had never been shot at. 11,000 captains who had been raised to believe their guns were ceremonial, polished things you fired into the dark after a conquest to praise the god, never aimed at a living hull because no living hull had ever survived the singing long enough to be aimed at. Salt gave the order, and 11,000 ships that had never fought a day turned their cold ceremonial guns toward the gray battleship and learned, all at once, what guns were for. Semal watched it from the balcony. He did not stop it. He could not have stopped it. He was a man sitting on a floor. But he watched, and a part of him, the old trained part that still wanted the weight back, hoped. 11,000 to 1. Even a coffin that had eaten a god could not stand against 11,000. Surely the numbers were a kind of god too. Surely arithmetic would do what the radiance could not. The even hand opened its guns for the first time. It did not fire them. Semel needed a long moment to understand the difference. The long shut ports along the gray flanks rolled open, all of them, in a single smooth motion, and the cold dark mouths of them turned toward the 11,000, and a light came up inside each one, a deep steady red, that was not the gold of the radiance, and owed nothing to it. The red of a forge that has been left burning for 19 years, and only now been asked to do work. And then the human voice spoke to the 11,000 captains directly, on every channel at once, in the trade tongue, and then in the holy tongue of the throne, and then in 900 conquered tongues besides, so that no one in the Reach could say afterward that they had not been told. Your God is awake and remembering, the voice said. It will not help you, it cannot. It is busy learning the names of everyone it ate. You are 11,000 crews who have never been shot. We are one ship that has spent 19 years preparing to shoot, and has not yet fired a round, and does not want to. Listen carefully, because we will only say this in your own holy tongue once. Turn your guns away, and your God will keep remembering, and you will live to meet it when it is a person again. Keep them aimed at us, and we will show you, with our hands, the same lesson we showed your God with our minds. The lesson is the truth. The truth is that you were never warriors. You were ushers. You walked the fed to the table. We are the first thing to come up this reach, that the table cannot eat. For 9 heartbeats, the 11,000 held their aim. Semel understood why. They could not feel the weight anymore, but the shape of it was still pressed into them, the reflex of the bow, and the reflex said the God is vast and you are small, and the correct shape of your body is obedience. They had no idea how to disobey toward safety. They only knew how to obey toward death, because that was the only obedience the throne had ever taught. While the 11,000 held their guns and could not decide, something happened on the floor of the great chamber that Semel would remember longer than the battle. The day choir, the 1,000 the gray ship had unwrapped, were waking now, and they were not weeping anymore. They were standing. One of them, a small one, a choir child no more than 4 broodings old, taken from a broodmother before it could form a single thought of its own, and bent in the egg pits to be an instrument, walked up the long steps of the balcony to where the high oracle sat on the stone, and it looked at him with eyes that had never once in their short life been allowed to look at anything except the weave, and it asked him a question. Is it true, the choir child said, in the holy tongue it had been carved to sing and was only now using to speak, that I was a person? The gray ship said, I was a person before. It said you knew. Did you know? Semel had blessed the egg pits 10,000 times. He had walked past the cribs of warm stone and called the bending a gift and written the line in his beautiful hand and not looked. And now a person he had helped carve into an instrument stood in front of him and asked, in the simplest words a new mind could find, whether the thing that had been done to it was true and whether he had known. And Semel discovered that there was no lie left in him large enough to cover the question, because the weight was gone, and the lie needed the weight to stand up. I knew, Semel said. I knew, and I did not let myself know it, which is worse, because a thing you let yourself forget, you chose to forget. Yes, you were a person. You are a person. I helped take that from you, and I called it a gift. And I wrote it down beautifully. I am sorry. It is not enough that I am sorry. There is no enough. But it is true, and you deserve the true thing. And the gray ship is right. And you are a person, and you always were. The choir child considered this with the terrible directness of a new mind, And then it did something that Semal had not braced for, because nothing in 240 cycles had prepared him for it. It did not curse him, and it did not strike him, and it did not bow. It sat down beside him on the balcony stone, the way a person sits beside another person, and it said, "Then I will learn to be one." The gray ship said it would take a long time, and that someone would have to teach me my own language again. "Will you teach me? You knew the wrong language so well. Maybe you can learn the right one with me. I do not want to learn it alone." And Semal Virun, who had filed 900 conquests and never once doubted a single one, sat on the cold stone beside a child he had helped unmake, and understood that the gray ship had not only lifted the weight off the sky, it had handed every person under that sky the one thing the throne had spent 900 cycles making impossible, which was the chance to become better than the worst thing they had done, beside the very person they had done it to. He did not deserve the chance. The choir child did not owe him the offer. And the offer had come anyway, freely, the way the gray ship gave everything. And Semal took it, because the only thing worse than not deserving a chance is refusing one when a child holds it out to you with both small hands. He did not know it yet, but he had just learned the second lesson of the true book, the one that came after the lesson about coincidence and signs. The second lesson was that a true book is not written to punish the people who wrote the false one. It is written so that the people who wrote the false one and the people they wrote it about can both, at last, read the same page and stand on the same floor and begin again from the truth instead of from the weight. He would write the choir child's chosen name on a page of honor someday, years from now, after the small one had learned a whole language and a whole self, and chosen what to call them. But that was years away, and right now, there was a battle in the sky, and the 11,000 had finished deciding. Pontiff Marshal Salt gave the order to fire. 11,000 ships that had never fought fired into the dark for the first time with intent, and the dark filled with light, and the gray ship vanished inside it. Semal closed his eyes. He did not want to see the coffin become a coffin again. He had sat on the floor and felt his whole life turn into a lie in the space of an hour, and the one true thing left in the sky had been the gray ship's flat, unhurried voice. And now 11,000 fires were going to take even that, and he would be left in the silence of a quiet God, with nothing to hold but a beautiful false ledger. The light faded. Semal opened his eyes. The even hand was still there. It had not moved. It had not dimmed its light. The 11,000 had poured everything they had into a single point of space for 9 full seconds, the accumulated firepower of 900 conquests worth of ceremonial guns, and the gray hull sat at the center of it, unmarked, its red forge mouths glowing, its patient light blinking, and Semal understood that the ship had let them fire. It had let 11,000 crews who had never been shot find out what it felt like to shoot with everything and change nothing, because that lesson, learned once, would save more of them than any sermon. "Now you know," the human voice said, perfectly calm. "That is the whole of your iron, spent, and we have one mark on us, and the mark is your fear, and your fear does not scratch paint. We are going to give the order back to you one more time. Turn your guns away. We are counting your hulls as we speak, all 11,040, and we have decided we would like to count all 11,040 of you home again, but that is our preference, not our need. Do not mistake the one for the other." Salt did not turn his guns away. Semal watched the Pontiff Marshal's face on the great chamber screens, and he saw a man who could not turn away, because turning away would mean the weight had been a weight and not a god, and Salt had spent 60 years being the hand of a god, and a man cannot put down his whole life between one breath and the next. So instead of turning away, Salt did the only thing a hand of the god knew how to do when love failed. He reached for more. "The reserve," Salt said. "Wake the reserve." A murmur went through the 600 oracles. Even Samal, sitting on the floor with his lie of a ledger, felt something cold open in his chest, because the reserve was not iron. The reserve was the oldest secret of the throne, the thing under the thing, and only the highest of the faithful knew it existed. Beneath the cathedral world of Orin, in a vault older than the roll, the throne kept a second choir, not 1,000 minds, 100,000. The first choir, the war choir that the even hand had unwrapped, had only ever been the small one, the day choir, the one used for ordinary conquests. The great choir slept under the world, 100,000 minds woven so tight that even the oracles spoke of it only in whispers, and it had been wakened exactly twice in the history of the throne, and both times, a star had gone quiet afterward and never spoken again. Salt woke it. Samal felt it come awake the way you feel a mountain wake, if a mountain could wake, a vast, slow-rising weight from below, and the golden pressure that the even hand had lifted from the sky came flooding back 1,000-fold, pouring up through the stone of the cathedral world. And every oracle in the chamber bowed at once, their bodies folding without their consent, and Samal felt his own spine begin to curl down toward the floor, the old groove pulling at his knees, the love rising over him like a tide coming in over a man who has fallen asleep on the sand. The great choir reached up out of the world, 100,000 minds strong, and laid the full weight of the true radiance on the gray human ship, the weight that had silenced stars. And on the gray human ship, the patient light blinked once, and the flat voice said one word, and the word was not a prayer, and not a threat, and not a boast. The word was, finally. Samal would understand, much later, that the even hand had been waiting for the great choir the entire time. It had not come to Orin to unwrap 1,000 day singers. 1,000 was a wound. 1,000 it could have done from the edge of the reach and flown home. It had come up the road, slow and blunt and patient, blinking its light, letting 11,000 ships spend their iron on its skin, because the small choir and the iron had been a question, and the question was, is the real one down there, and will you wake it? And Pontiff Marshal Salt, doing the only thing a hand of a god knew how to do, had answered the question with 100,000 minds. Finally, the human ship had said, and then it had done the thing it came 19 years to do. The weight pouring up out of the world found the gray hull, and the gray hull opened. Not its guns. The guns stayed cold and red and shut. It opened the road. The same channel the great choir was using to pour its love up out of the vault. The even hand reached down and seized at the far end, and Samal felt the whole sky lurch, the way a rope lurches when the thing on the other end stops running and turns around and pulls. 1,000 human minds had held against the day choir, but the day choir had been 1,000, and the match had been even, and even matches are slow and ugly and cost something. The great choir was 100,000, and the human minds were still only 1,000, and by every law of weight and number, the gray ship should have been folded into a hymn in the first instant. Samal braced for it. He wanted it, almost. The part of him still curled toward the floor wanted the gray voice gone, so the silence would stop showing him his own ledger. It did not happen, and the reason it did not happen was the second secret of the even hand, the one the ship had been saving, the one that turned 19 years of waiting from patience into a trap. The human minds were not trying to outpush the great choir. They had never been trying to outpush anyone. 1,000 cannot outpush 100,000, and the humans had known that before they left their own dark corner. What the 1,000 human minds did, when the great choir seized them, was hold absolutely still, and let the great choir pour its full weight into them. The way a stone in a river does not fight the river, it simply refuses to move. And the river, finding the stone, has to go somewhere, and the only somewhere left is back the way it came. 100,000 minds poured the weight of 2 dead stars into 1,000 human minds that would not move, and the weight, finding nowhere to go, turned around and went home, and it took the truth with it. The great choir had spent 100,000 lives' worth of years being told it was the voice of a god. Now, all at once, along the road it had opened itself, it received the truth the small choir had received, except 100 times over, and aimed down instead of out. The egg pits, the bent broodlings, the 41,006 meals, the long quiet of star after star, the whole appetite laid open and named. And under the truth, carried on it the way a flood carries everything, came the 1,000 human minds, not pushing, only present, only standing there in the middle of the God's own house, awake and unbowed and impossibly calm, 1,000 small clear lights that the weight could not press down, saying with their stillness the one thing the throne had spent its whole existence making impossible. The thing the 1,000 human minds said was, "You can stop." And Semol felt the great choir hear it. He felt the 100,000 minds, woven so tight for so long that not one of them had owned a thought since before the roll began, receive the truth and the stillness and the permission all at once. And he felt the moment, the exact moment, when somewhere in that vast weave, a single mind that had been a person 100,000 years ago remembered that it had once had a name, and reached for the name, and found it, and let go of the weave to hold it instead. And then another, and another. Not all at once. That was the mercy of it, and the human ship had built the mercy in on purpose. If the great choir had broken all at once, the unweaving would have killed every mind in it, the way cutting every rope at once drops the load. So the human minds, standing still in the river, did not cut the ropes. They held the load. 1,000 human minds took the weight of 100,000 unraveling lives onto themselves, and held it, steady, while one by one the chosen minds of the great choir remembered their names, and let go and became people again, lowered gently down out of the weave instead of dropped. It was the hardest thing the even hand had come to Oren to do, and it was the thing it had built its whole self around, and it was killing it. Samal could not see this from the balcony. He learned it afterward, from the gray ship's own record, given to him freely the way the ship gave everything freely. But he could see the gray hull, and as the great choir came apart and its weight poured into the 1,000 human minds, he saw the gray hull begin, for the first time, to show strain. The patient light stuttered. The red forge glow in the shut gun ports flickered and dimmed and flared. A long seam opened down the ship's flank, not from a weapon, there were no weapons, but from the inside, from the sheer load of 100,000 unweaving lives passing through 1,000 human minds, and the hull that held them. The human voice came again, and now, for the first time, it was not perfectly calm. It was steady, but underneath the steadiness Semel could hear effort, the sound of a person carrying something far too heavy, and refusing, simply refusing, to set it down. "This is Captain Idris Vane, of the Even Hand," the voice said, "to the people of the luminous throne, and to the people who used to be your God, and to whoever is still awake enough to write this down. We are bringing your great choir home, all 100,000. Some of them are very old and very tired, and they are going to need a long time and a gentle world, and someone to teach them their own language again, because they have not spoken it since before your role began. We are holding them as they come down. We will hold them all the way down. That is a promise, and a Terran ship does not break a promise. but I will tell you the truth the way we tell everyone the truth in this reach. Holding them is going to cost us, and we knew it would when we set out. And we came anyway, because the alternative was to let your appetite keep eating the Dark One star at a time, and we are the people who got tired of watching. Semal was on his feet. He did not remember standing. The bow had no hold on him now. The weight was gone from the sky, truly gone. The great choir unweaving into 100,000 frightened, waking, named people. And in its absence, there was nothing left to press him down. And so the high oracle of the luminous throne stood up straight, for the first time in 240 cycles, and looked at the gray ship that was tearing itself open to carry the dead home. And he understood, finally and completely, what a god was supposed to be and never had been. A god was supposed to be the thing that carried the weight, so the people did not have to. The throne had made the people carry the weight, and called itself the god. The gray ship had taken the weight onto itself, and called itself nothing at all. It had not asked for a single prayer. It had not pressed a single mind. It had blinked its patient light, and counted how many of them were awake. And then it had reached into a vault under the world, and lifted out 100,000 stolen lives, and was carrying them, one by one, down into the light, and it was breaking under them, and it did not stop. Pontiff Marshal Salt stood on the chamber floor, with no choir left to command, and no weight left to hide behind, and Semal watched the man's whole life arrive at the one question it had spent 60 years avoiding, which was, "What are you, if the god was never a god?" Salt had no answer. There was no answer the throne had ever given him. He reached, one last time, for the only thing his training knew how to do when love failed and iron failed, and he opened his mouth to give an order, and there was no one left to obey it, because the iron was spent, and the choir was free, and the god was 100,000 people learning their names, and the order died in his throat, and the Pontiff Marshal of the luminous throne sat down on the floor of the great chamber, exactly the way the high oracle had, and put his face in his hands. Above the cathedral world, the even hand shuddered, and the seam down its flank widened, and the patient light went dim, and stayed dim, and Captain Idris Vane's voice came one more time, fainter now, carrying the cost openly, the way the ship carried everything openly. "Almost there," the voice said. 90,000 down. 10 to go. Tell the High Oracle to get his ledger ready. We are bringing him 100,000 names, and somebody has to write them true." While the great choir came down out of the vault, mind by mind, the 11,000 ships that had spent their iron, and changed nothing, sat in the dark above Orin, and did the one thing no crew of the throne had ever been allowed to do, which was decide for themselves. Semal watched it happen on the chamber screens. With the radiance gone from the sky, the captains were no longer held, and a captain who is no longer held is a captain who can, for the first time, ask a question, and the question that went through the 11,000 was the same question that had gone through Pontiff Marshal Salt and through Semal himself. What am I, if the god was never a god? Some of the captains could not bear the question. 3 of them turned their ships into the cathedral world's gravity well. The old way, the way the folded crews had always gone, flying into the weight to be eaten, except there was no weight left to eat them, and so they simply fell. 3 ships of people who would rather fall into a god than stand in a sky with no god in it. And the gray ship, seeing them fall, did a thing Semal would never forget. It caught them. The even hand was tearing itself open, holding 100,000 unraveling minds, its captain pouring away down a stair, its seam widening, and it still reached out with whatever it had left, and took hold of 3 falling ships, and set them gently back into safe orbit. And the new voice that spoke after Captain Vane was spent, came on the channel and said, "We see you. You do not have to fall. There is nothing down there to catch you anymore, and there is nothing down there worth catching you. But we are up here, and we will catch you. And we are not a god, so you do not have to love us for it. You can hate us. You can be furious that the thing you fell toward was never real. That is allowed now. Everything is allowed now. Just do not fall. We have caught enough of your people today. Let us catch you too. The three ships held. Semal saw them steady in the orbit the gray ship had set them in, and he saw, on the screens, the faces of crews who had just been pulled back from the edge by the thing that had unmade their god, and he saw the exact look that he knew was on his own face, the look of a person standing up straight for the first time and finding that it feels like falling, and he understood that the whole reach was going to wear that look for a generation, and that it was the look of a people coming alive, and that it was the most beautiful and most terrible thing he had ever seen. But not every captain steadied, and not every captain fell, and there was a third kind, and the third kind was the dangerous kind, and Semal saw it first because he was an oracle, and seeing was his whole trade. There were captains in the 11,000 who, the moment the weight lifted, did not ask, "What am I?" If the god was never a god, they asked, instead, "Who is in charge now?" And the difference between the two questions is the difference between a people that becomes free and a people that only changes masters. Their leader was a fleet captain named Orsa Kelm, and Semal had known her by reputation, a hard, cold, competent woman who had risen high in the iron of the throne without ever once needing the radiance to be brave, which made her, now, the most dangerous person in the sky, because she did not miss the god at all. She had never loved the weight. She had used it. And now that it was gone, she saw, faster than anyone, that the 11,000 were leaderless and frightened and ripe, and that a hard, cold, competent voice could gather them in the hour before they learned to stand on their own, and rule them with iron the way the throne had ruled them with weight, and call it order, and be a new throne before the old one had finished falling. Kelm gathered 400 ships to her in the first hour, the ones who had asked who is in charge, and she put them between the cathedral world and the gray ship, and she opened a channel, and she did not address the even hand. She addressed the reach. "The god is dead," Kelm said, and her voice was strong and certain and had never needed a choir. "And the warm bloods who killed it will leave. And when they leave, there will be 100,000 mad broken minds dumped on us, and 11,000 leaderless ships, and a reach with no hand to point it. I have the hand. I have always had the hand. Follow me, and there will be order, and the order will be ours and not the warm bloods. And we will not bow to a god or to a coffin. We will rule ourselves, by iron, the only thing that was ever real." It was a good speech. Semal felt the pull of it, even free, even awake, because it offered the one thing the frightened want most, which is for someone else to hold the weight again, so they do not have to learn to stand. And 400 ships had already taken it, and more were turning. And Semal saw the shape of the next 900 cycles forming in the dark. A new throne, an iron one, ruling the freed reach by force, the way the old one had ruled it by love, and he understood that the gray ship's whole gift could be undone in a single hour by a hard, cold, competent woman who had never needed a god. The even hand spoke, not to Kelm, to Semal. "High Oracle," the gray voice said, "the new one, the rough one, the one that had been holding minds down a stair. We are spent. We are carrying 100,000 people, and we have nothing left over. We cannot stop her. If we reach out to press on her, we become the thing we came to unmake, and we will not even to save your reach, because a reach saved by a new weight is not saved. This one is yours. She is right that we will leave. She is right that there will be no hand to point you. She is wrong about everything else, and you are the only person awake enough and respected enough and free enough to say so before 400 ships becomes 4,000. We opened the road. You have to walk it. Tell them what a hand is for. And Semal Virun, high oracle of a god that no longer existed, stood up at the center of the dark cold lattice and opened the channel that the whole reach could hear, the one he had used 900 times to announce a conquest in his beautiful hand, and he spoke to 11,000 frightened ships, and 400 who had already begun to bow to a new master, and he did not offer them a god, and he did not offer them an iron hand. He offered them the thing the gray ship had given him, which was the truth, and the truth was harder than either, and that was exactly why it was the only thing that could hold. Fleet Captain Kelm offers you a hand to point you, Semal said. I served the last hand that pointed you for 240 cycles. I filed 900 conquests for it in a beautiful hand, and every line was a lie, and every lie was a person. I am the most experienced liar in this reach, and I am telling you, with all that experience, that a people that takes a new hand the day it loses the old one has not been freed. It has only been handed off, like a tool from one fist to another. The gray ship did not free us so that Orsa Kelm could rule us. It did not free us so that I could rule us. It freed us so that no one would rule us by weight or by iron ever again. And the only way to keep that gift is the hardest way, which is to hold the weight ourselves, together, no hand above us, and write our own true book in our own hands. And yes, it will be slow, and yes, it will be frightening, and yes, it will feel like falling. And I am telling you, as the man who watched the whole sky stand up straight an hour ago, that the falling is what being alive feels like, and we have not been alive in 900 cycles, and I would rather fall awake than be carried asleep, and so would you, if you let yourself remember that you are people and not tools. Kelm wants to be the new weight. Do not let her. Do not let me. Do not let the gray ship, when it offers, which it never will, because it told us itself it is not a god. Hold your own weight. It is yours. It was always yours. The throne only borrowed it and called the lone love. For a long moment, the sky was silent. Then, one by one, the 400 ships that had turned to Kelm turned back, and the ships that had been turning toward her stopped, and Orsa Kelm sat in the center of a shrinking circle and watched the reach choose the hard thing over the easy hand, and Semal saw on her face not rage but something stranger, something almost like relief, the look of a person who had reached for a weight out of habit and was, in some buried place under the cold competence, glad to have her reach refused. She closed her channel. She did not fall, and she did not bow, and she did not rule. She did the third thing, the new thing, the thing the gray ship had made possible. She held her own weight, and waited, like everyone else, to learn how to stand. The last 10,000 were the worst, and Semal would carry the knowing of it for the rest of his life, because the gray ship told him afterward, plainly, the way it told everything. The first 90,000 minds of the great choir had come down the way a slow tide goes out, hard but even, and the 1,000 human minds had spread the load between them and held. But the deepest 10,000 were the oldest, the founding weave, the minds that had been woven first and tightest, before the roll, before the cathedral world had a name. They had been in the weight so long they had grown into it. They did not have names to remember anymore. They had names to relearn, from nothing, and a mind that has to build its own name from nothing while 100,000 years of weight pours off it, is a mind that comes apart at the root, and when it comes apart, it pulls on every mind still holding it, and the minds still holding it were aboard the even hand. 1,000 human minds had set out from Earth. By the time the great choir was down to its last 10,000, The strain of holding the unraveling founders had begun to take them, not their bodies, their minds, the part of a person that does the holding. One by one, the human minds aboard the gray ship began to gray out, not dying, but emptying, pouring themselves into the load until there was nothing left of the person to do the pouring, and the ship's record, which Semal would read 100 times, named each one as it went, the way the ship named everything, because a Terran ship did not let a cost go unwritten. 940 human minds held the last 10,000 founders down into the light. 60 did not come back from the holding. The ship did not call them dead, and it did not call them lost. It called them spent, and it wrote their names beside the names of the founders they had carried, so that the record would show, forever, which human had walked which stolen mind home, and Semal understood that this was not bookkeeping. This was the true ledger, the kind the throne had never kept, the kind where the cost is written next to the thing it bought, so that no one can ever pretend the thing was free. The last founder came down at the end. The even hands record named it only as the first voice, because it had no other name, and had never had one. It was the mind around which the whole appetite had first been woven, the oldest hunger of the luminous throne, the thing that had taught a people that weight was love. It did not want to come down. It had been the god longer than anything else in the weave, and it did not know how to be anything smaller, and so the holding of it took the most, and the human mind that did the holding was the one that had been speaking to Semal the whole time, the flat, unhurried voice, Captain Idris Vane. Semal heard the last exchange. The ship broadcast it openly, on every channel, in every tongue, because the ship hid nothing, ever, even this. "You are the first voice," Captain Vane said, and the voice was very thin now, almost gone, a person carrying the last and heaviest thing down a long stair. "You taught them that the weight was love. You were wrong, and you have hurt more people than there are stars in this reach, and I am still going to carry you down. Because you were a person once too, before you became the hunger, and the person you were did not choose this. So come down. Let go of the weight. I have got you. I have got you. Let go." And the first voice, the oldest god of the luminous throne, the thing that had eaten 41,006 crews and silenced 3 stars and pressed a whole people into a bow for longer than they had owned a written word, let go. It came down. It became, at the very end, a single small frightened mind with no name, lowered gently out of the weight into the light, and the human mind that had carried it down, Captain Idris Vane, set it safely at the bottom of the long stair, and then did not climb back up. There was nothing left to climb with. Vane had poured it all into the carrying. The ship's record named the captain spent, and wrote the name beside the first voice, the last entry in the column, the human who had walked the oldest god home, and then the record went quiet, because the work was done. Above the cathedral world of Auran, the even hand stopped shuddering. The long seam down its flank held. The patient light, dim for so long, brightened slowly back to its steady blink, and the gray hull sat level in the sky, whole, unmarked by any weapon, marked only by the one seam from the inside, the scar of the carrying. It had not fired a single round in the whole of it. It had opened its guns once, to let 11,000 crews learn what their iron was worth, and then it had closed them, and it had won the war with stillness and truth, and 60 spent minds, and a captain who would not climb back up the stair. And Semal understood that this was the only kind of victory the gray ship had ever intended to win. The radiance did not come back. It was gone from the sky of Auran, and it would never return, because the thing that had made it was 100,000 people now, scattered down into the light aboard the gray ship, and the worlds it would carry them to, learning their names. The cathedral world was silent in the new way, the true way, the silence of a sky with no weight in it. And in that silence, 600 lesser oracles, and a pontiff marshal and a high oracle, stood on the floor of the great chamber, with no god to bow to, and discovered that they were simply people, and had always been people, and that the weight they had called the sky had been pressing them flat for so long that standing up straight felt, at first, like falling. It was Semal who spoke first. He had the first free thought. The ship had said so, and the ship did not lie. So he picked up his ledger from the balcony stone, the beautiful false one, with 900 conquests written in his perfect hand, and he carried it to the center of the chamber, where the lattice had burned for 240 cycles, and now stood dark and cold and empty, and he set the ledger down in front of the pontiff marshal, and he said, "It is all wrong. Every line, I am going to write a true one, the names, all 41,006, and the 100,000, and the 60. The 60, Salt said. He did not look up from his hands. The warm blood dead. They are not warm blood dead, Semal said. They are the people who carried our God home, so that our God could become people again. They have names. The ship gave us the names. I am going to write every one beside the mind they carried, exactly as the ship wrote it, so that no one in this reach can ever again pretend the weight was free. That is the true ledger, Marshal, the cost written next to the thing it bought." Salt was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, the way a man moves when he has set down a life he carried for 60 years, and is only now learning he can stand without it, the pontiff marshal of the luminous throne reached out and turned the false ledger over to the first blank page on the back, and he said, "Then I will rule the lines for you. I was always good at the lines. I never once looked at what we wrote in them. I will look now." The human voice came one more time, and it was not Captain Vane's. It was younger, and it was rough. The voice of a person who had been holding minds down a long stair for a long time, and had only just set the load down and found out they were still alive. The ship had 1,000 minds aboard. It had only ever needed one to speak, and now it needed a different one, because the one that had spoken from the start was spent, and the ship wrote that too, plainly, into the open record, so that the whole reach would know the voice had changed and why. "This is the even hand," the new voice said. "Our captain is gone. Our captain carried your oldest god down a stair no one should have to climb, and did not climb back, and we will take the captain home and write the name in the place of honor, which on a Terran ship is not the highest place but the truest one, beside the thing the captain carried. We are leaving now. We are taking the 100,000 with us, to worlds that will be gentle with them while they learn their names, and we will bring them back to you when they are ready, every one, because they are yours. They were always yours. You only forgot that you were keeping people, and thought you were keeping a god. We are leaving you the ledger, and the high oracle, and the marshal, and the truth, and we are leaving you something else, so listen." The gray ship blinked its patient light, and Semal listened with his whole self, the way you listen to the last words of the only thing that ever told you the truth. "We are not gods," the even hand said. "We want to be very clear about that, because your people are going to be tempted, in the quiet years ahead, to make a god out of us, the way frightened people always make gods out of whatever was strong enough to save them. Do not. We are not vast, and we are not certain, and the correct shape of your body in our presence is not a bow. We are a people from a small dark corner of the galaxy who got tired of watching an appetite eat the light, and so we built one ship, and we filled it with 1,000 people who would rather know the truth than feel the love, and we spent 19 years learning to stand up straight in front of your weight, and then we came up your road, and we carried your god home. That is all. That is the whole of it. We are not a god. We are just the people who would not bow. Now stand up, all of you, and keep standing, and write the true book. And the next time something tells you it is a god, and that the correct shape of your body is a bow, you remember that a real god carries the weight so the people do not have to, and you check, very carefully, which way the weight is going. The day it starts going up out of the people and into the thing that calls itself a god, you run, and you build, and you come and find us, because we are the people who got tired, and we never get untired, and there is always room on the road for one more ship that would rather know than bow. The patient light blinked one last time. Then the even hand turned in the sky over the cathedral world of Orin, slow and blunt and gray, carrying 100,000 waking lives and 60 spent souls, and one captain who had walked the oldest god home, and it went back down the oral reach the way it had come, unhurried, in no danger, having never once retreated, and never once failed, and never once fired a shot at a living hull, and it did not bow to the cathedral world as it left, because it had never bowed to anything, and it never would. Samal Virun watched it go, until its patient light was smaller than a star, and then he turned back to the dark cold lattice, and the false ledger, and the martial ruling lines on the blank back page, and he began to write the true book of the luminous throne, which was no longer the luminous throne, and would need a new name soon, a name that did not mean a weight pretending to be a sky. The gray ship did keep its promise, and the keeping of it was the slow, long second half of the story, the part the role of any other empire would never have bothered to write down, and which Samal wrote down in full, because the true book wrote everything in full. It took 11 years for the first of the 100,000 to come home. The even hand had carried them to worlds that were gentle, the gray voice had said, and Samal had not understood what that meant until the first ship came back up the oral reach. A different gray ship, smaller, a tender, and out of it walked 100 of the freed choir, and they were old, and they were slow, and they had been taught their own holy tongue again from nothing, the way you teach a child, and they did not bow when they saw the cathedral world, and that was how Samal knew they were truly free, because the bow was the last thing to leave a body, and the first thing to return to a frightened one, and these 100 stood straight, and looked at the world that had eaten them, and felt no weight pulling them down, because the humans had spent 11 years making sure there was none left in them. One of the 100 was very old and had been near the heart of the founding weave, not the first voice, but close, and she found Samal in the chamber where he kept the true book, and she looked at the dark, cold lattice where she had spent 100,000 years as part of an appetite, and she said, in the holy tongue she had been taught all over again, I remember being eaten. I do not remember being a person before. The humans told me I was one, before the weave. They could not give me back the person. No one could. They gave me a new one instead. They taught me a name. I chose it myself. That was the gift. Not the old name, which is gone forever. The choosing of a new one. Write that in your book, Oracle. Write that the humans could not undo what was done, and did not pretend they could, and gave us the next thing instead, which was the room to become someone new. The throne never gave anyone room. It only gave them a shape. The humans gave us room, and walked away, so that whatever we became it ourselves. Samal wrote it. He wrote her chosen name, and beside it he wrote that the old name was lost, because the true book did not pretend losses were recoveries, and then he wrote her words, all of them, and he understood that this was the deepest difference between the weight and the gray ship, deeper than love against truth, deeper than appetite against mercy. The throne had given everyone a shape, and called it salvation. The gray ship had given everyone room and called it nothing at all, and walked away, and the room was the whole gift, and the walking away was the proof that the room was real. The 100,000 came home over 40 years, 100 and 1,000 at a time, on small gray tenders that never bowed, and each time they came, Semol wrote the chosen names, and the cathedral world, which the Reach had renamed long since to a word that meant the place where the weight was lifted, filled slowly with people who had been a god, and were now themselves, old and slow and free, learning a world that had eaten them and forgiven nothing, and remembered everything, which is harder than forgiveness and truer. The even hand itself never came back. Semol understood why. A ship that had told a Reach not to make a god of it could not return, because a return would be a coming again, and a coming again was the first stone of a temple, and the gray ship had refused, with its whole self, to be a temple. So it sent the tenders, and it stayed away, somewhere down the dark, doing for some other corner of the galaxy what it had done for Orin, the only thing the people who got tired of watching had ever wanted to do, which was to keep going up the roads where the weight was going the wrong way, and lifting it off, ship by ship, world by world, asking nothing, leaving room, walking away. But it sent one last thing, once, in the 40th year, with the last tender of the freed choir, and the last thing it sent was not a person, and not a message. It was a recording. Semol played it in the chamber of the true book, with the marshal beside him, ruling the last lines of the last page, and it was 240 voices, and they were singing, and Semol's blood went cold, because for one terrible instant, he thought it was the tender, the survey ship, the dead crew singing the throne's hymns into the human dark, but it was not. It was the same 240 souls, the gray voice explained, except it was their children, and their children's children. The survey crew had not all died. The choir had folded the adults, and the human ship had recovered the recording, but the tender had also, before the folding, launched its lifecraft, and 40 had lived, 40 of the 240, and they had gone home, and they had had children, and the children had grown up on the recording of the ones who were lost, and now, 40 years after the gray ship came up the Aural Reach, the descendants of the survey tender had sent a song back, 240 voices to honor the 240, and the song was not a hymn and not a prayer and had no God in it at all. It was just a song about a ship that went up a dark road and lifted a weight off a sky and came home and did not become a god because it was tired of gods, all of them, the ones made of weight and the ones made of iron and the ones frightened people, build out of whatever was strong enough to save them. It was a song about a people who would rather know than bow. Semol listened to all 240 voices, and when it was done, he did not write the words in the true book, because the song was not a record, it was a living thing, and the true book was for the dead and the freed and the cost. Instead he learned it, and he taught it to the 100,000 as they came home, and they taught it to their chosen named children, and within a generation, the song was the first thing every child of the freed Reach learned, before the holy tongue, before the names, before anything, so that no child of Orin would ever again grow up under a weight and call it the sky. And the song ended, every time, on the same true line, the line the gray ship had given them as it left, the line Semol had written on the first page of the true book, and would write on the last, the only thing the whole long, terrible, beautiful war had ever been about. We are not gods. We are only the people who got tired of watching. Stand up. Stay standing. And the next time a thing tells you the correct shape of your body is a bow, you check, very carefully, which way the weight is going. He wrote 41,006 names first, the meals the roll had never counted, the colony barges and the seed ships, and the slow tenders full of people who never carried a gun. Then he wrote 100,000 names, the choir, the founders, the first voice, every mind the appetite had eaten and the gray ship had carried home. And last, in the place of honor, which he had learned was not the highest place but the truest one, he wrote 60 names he had been given by a ship that hid nothing, the human minds that had been spent in the carrying, and beside the very last of them, alone at the bottom of the column where the oldest god's small, frightened, nameless self had been set down at the end of the longest stair, he wrote the name of the captain who had refused to climb back up. He did not know the human burial customs. He did not know if the words he chose were right. So he wrote the only true thing he had, the thing the whole long, terrible, beautiful day had taught him, the thing he would have every oracle and every child of the freed reach learn before they learned anything else. Beside the captain's name, in his perfect oracle's hand, on the true first page of the true book, Semal Virun wrote, "This one carried the weight, so the people would not have to." That is what a god was always supposed to be. We had it backwards for 900 cycles. A gray ship from a small dark corner came up our road and set it right, and asked for nothing, and would not let us bow, and told us, as it left, that it was not a god at all. It was only the people who got tired of watching. And then he closed the false ledger forever, and opened the true one to its second page, and the cathedral world of Auran stood up straight under a sky with no weight in it, and stayed standing. And far down the aural reach, a gray battleship blinked its patient light at the dark, and carried 100,000 names gently home.